Welcome to Creative Innovators with Gigi Johnson. Yep, that's me. And I am excited to bring to you great people from all over the world who are making changes, breaking things, and remaking them around various creative industries. So bring us your great innovators and we'll bring them to you here in the Creative Innovators Podcast. Jack Conte blends two worlds. He mixes the worlds of music creation, where he is part of both Pomplamoose and Scary Pockets, and mixes that with solving creative problems with systems with the crowdfunding and community platform called Patreon that he co-founded as well. Jack shares how he balances, or sometimes doesn't balance, creating music and running a large tech business. He shares what he's learned, how his companies have shifted during this work-from-home era, and how he has changed the way that he does his own creative processes. His career journey has been an interesting mingling of music and science and technology, all the way back to his science teacher who got him interested and who he still connects with monthly over Costco pizza. Enjoy this intriguing interview with Jack Conte. I would love to hear how you are, before we get started here, how you balance being a musician and running a not small tech company.
Yeah, that's the trick, isn't it? I haven't always been good at it. In fact, the first while in the business, I was not taking a salary as CEO. Instead, I wanted to make my living as a musician using the platform. And I felt like that was an important proof point. And, there's some good benefits of that too, in terms of dog fooding your own product and making sure that it works and having your own butt on the line if things don't work. So that's what I did the first few years. The next few years, I started taking a salary as CEO and then was unable to keep up music. And so I stopped working on music for maybe 3 to 4 years. My output basically went down to zero, which was really hard on me personally, because I feel like I'm on earth to make music, and that's a big part of who I am and where my heart is. And so that was really tough. But then about 3 years ago, I started a funk band with my buddy, and I fly down to LA once a month. We meet on a Saturday or a Sunday. We record 4 songs. Then we started doing all the editing and post-production ourselves, but slowly as it's become a profitable business, we've hired a team, and now I've got about 15 or 20 contractors who basically help do all the post-production workflows and everything. So I get to just basically fly down to LA once a month, go to the studio, record 4 songs. They come out one a week on YouTube and then on Spotify and everywhere else. And then we replicated that model too with my other band, Pomplamoose, which is my band with my wife. So now Pomplamoose does the same thing. I fly down once a month. We do 4 songs and those come out. So now I'm coming out with 100 songs a year.
Wow.
And 100 music videos a year.
That's such a different model than what you guys were doing before.
It's so different. But we had to change the options were don't come out with music, or completely redesign our creative process so that we can continue to be musicians and have fun. And so I can continue to be involved. And so we did. We completely redesigned our creative process. And that allows me to essentially spend maybe 2 days a month, on a Saturday and a Sunday, recording 1 day for Pomplamoose, 1 day for Scary Pockets. And then I have a couple operations meetings during the week with the teams, video and audio. And my wife, runs Pomplamoose, and my partner in crime on Scary Pockets runs Scary Pockets. But I still come to some of those meetings and, offer some input and feedback. But mostly the teams are running with those at this point. So I get to do the fun part. I get to come down to a studio and record and be a creator on YouTube, which is a blast.
Who's writing? Because music doesn't magically just show up when you walk into the studio.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, Scary Pockets mostly does covers.
Okay.
And we do actually come out with quite a bit of original music, like 1 or 2 albums a year of original material, which we write in the studio. Day of, no preparation. We just write and record right there as a band. And that's very fun. But then Pomplamoose, my wife does the writing for Pomplamoose. I used to be more involved in the writing process, but I can't do that anymore. So she does most of the writing, almost all the writing. And yeah, when we get to the studio, now we have also we've gotten better at delegating and building the team. So there's a pre-production crew, and we give feedback on the demos and talk about how things are flowing. And Natalie's running that as well. So by the time we get to the studio, we have some parts that we can, record, and we do a lot of the arranging, but there's a joy, actually. It's really fun to iterate on that process over time.
So you've become a machine. No, but you've become a creative machine where you've been able to really create. I'm assuming a video process too, not just audio, because you're creating content to go into YouTube.
Yeah, that's an interesting word choice. And I myself am obsessed with that. And actually I'm making a little film, not a little film, it's maybe a 30 or 40-minute film about a creator who I have witnessed and learned from over the last few years. And I've watched them build a machine. It's now a company. They have an office space. They have 100 employees, and they've turned from YouTube creator into what is now just inarguably a media company. And so Pamplemousse has been learning from that as well, and looking at that. Pamplemousse actually now looks a lot like a media company. We make media, and we have subscription revenue from that media, and we have ad revenue from that media, and we have different lines of business, and we have contractors, and we have employees, and it is kind of like a media company. There is an operation and a system around it. So it is, it's not entirely mechanical. It's still very creative, but a lot of the process has been mechanized.
Now, does that pull from your experiences also then in growing, seeding, and launching a company that becomes the machine under so many other creators? I mean, it sounds like there's been great cross-pollination between what you've built on the Patreon side and what you've now built on the creative side.
Yeah, I mean, this is a love of mine that I've only learned about, in the last 7 years, is like scaling processes and systems, and thinking about how to do that, and how to do it with heart, because I think that's the hard part. But yes, a lot of the stuff that certainly I've learned at Patreon in scaling a technology company, I'm now applying those processes to Pamplemousse. Everything from literally my last call that ended at 2 p.m. was a monthly finance review for Pamplemousse. And so we run our monthly finance review the same exact way that Patreon runs its monthly finance reviews. We look at our books, we ask similar questions, we look at our lines of revenue, we look at our expenses, we look at how we're trending on net income, we make sure that we're investing in the areas of the business that are working, and we make sure that we're letting go and making hard choices around areas of the business that aren't working. And so there's been a lot of learning and pulling from each that kind of informs and influences the other. And that's been that's been so fun. I
your
love
face
that part
lights
of it.
up. It's the benefit actually doing this with a video recording. I can see your face light up on this as to how this excites you. So I'm going to take you backwards. And I know that many people have talked to you and written about your story of how you got started, and how actually your two main cohorts in crime are actually your Stanford cohorts in crime. But when you were at Stanford, you were both music and a bit of tech?
So my major was music widely. And then I had two areas of focus. One was composition, and the other was music science and technology. So composition was like, theory, classical theory, jazz theory, writing for symphony orchestra, writing for big band. And then the music science and technology portion of it was through the CARMA department, CCRMA, Center for Computer Research, Music and Acoustics. And that was, everything from building hardware synthesizers to algorithmic composition to, recording and engineering, you name it.
How? Why? Most people I know start from one part of that journey or the other, right? So that they're a creative and they realize under the hood they enjoy the technology side, or they're a technologist who plays music on the side and then ends up with music being a big part of their lives. Stanford is not necessarily a place that usually beckons to music composers. What was the journey before that, if you don't mind me getting parental and asking the earlier question?
No, it's fine. I wish there was like a really great answer around this. I don't think there is. I was a good student. I really cared about school. I've always worked like super hard, in my life. I feel like even through school, I've always had this feeling, like looking around the classroom and feeling like I wasn't the smartest kid in the class. And so I had to work twice as hard as everyone else just to kind of keep up, not to get ahead, just to stay there, and I worked really hard in school and I did well. And I ended up I fell in love with physics when I was in high school. I had an amazing physics teacher named Tucker Hyatt, and he just was so influential on me. And I fell in love with science in his classes. And I got to college and I wanted to be a physics major. And I remember, the first couple years of college, doing that whole track. And a couple years in, I remember sitting in a lecture hall, and like the passion and enthusiasm of the teacher relative to Tucker
Oh, yeah.
was, it was not there. It was gone. It was like they had fallen out of love with their field. And I'm sure they hadn't. I'm sure I was just in a mood and it was a bad day, or they were having a bad day, or whatever it was. But I remember looking up that day and feeling like this fire, I think, had more to do with that teacher and their worldview and how just wonderful that teacher was than it did the subject itself. I still actually am a total science nerd. I love physics. I love astronomy. I love science in general. But it was that at that moment where I kind of had that, what at the time was a very depressing realization that I was going to be a musician. That was like not an easy choice. That was a very sad moment in my life. My uncle, I wish it was like a happy thing, but I was like, well, I'm going to play music and I have no idea how I'm going to make money from that. Like, I know I need to do this because it's what I care about and it's what I'm passionate about. But I felt like I was committing to a life of not earning money. And that.
And physics was going to make you a lot of money?
Well, I figured like, hey, with a degree in science, like there's
somebody
a lot of
will
options,
hire you.
Somebody's going to hire me for something. Versus like if I'm a musician, I was thinking, oh God, I don't know that I'm going to be able. I don't know what I'm going to do, because I thought, well, if I'm, I thought if I'm, if I, what are the chances that I'm going to like make music that everybody wants to hear? And like, this is before YouTube. This is before the internet. This is like before it was possible to be a full-time creator, which now, 15 years later, it's just a matter of hard work and dedication, like any other thing. But it wasn't that
and
way.
Finding fans.
Finding fans. But again, even finding fans there are like systems around that now. And like, you can like, again, if you're dedicated enough, you can iterate toward product market fit on the technology side or on the music side, right? Like you can find your audience. The internet is full of weirdos. If you're 1 in 1,000, if you're really weird, if let's say you're really, really weird, you have really bizarre taste. Well, there's 2 billion people online. So there's 2 million weirdos just like you who would probably love your music, even if it's really bizarre. So, that didn't exist 15 years ago, and it's just different world.
It was harder to find the weirdos. They were out there, but they weren't in the same place you were going to be.
They weren't connected.
So graduating from Stanford, you then, have you gone back to tell Tucker Hyatt that he inspired you?
I hang with Tucker probably like once a month.
So he's in NorCal too.
Yeah, we're good buddies.
Not everyone's good buddies with their high school physics teacher.
I know, it's bizarre, but we both have a love of Costco pizza. So we go to Costco and eat pizza together.
Oh no.
I know.
Okay. So you graduate from Stanford. You're in NorCal, hotbed of music. Oh, can be. And then you started creating.
Yes. First I worked on an album. I got a job. If we're really going back after graduation, I got a job as an SAT tutor.
Oh, wow.
Because I didn't know what I was going to do, but I was good at math. And so I was tutoring kids in math and trying to figure out how to make a living as a musician. And eventually I got hooked up with a guy who was through a mutual friend who started hiring me for like corporate background music type gigs. And so that's where I really honed my music engineering, mixing, and production chops, is in like doing corporate background music and just about equalization and compressors and making things sound good. And then at some point I landed another job doing, like, I was basically an in-house composer for Google for doing more corporate background music for like in-house videos as a contractor. Like I was an employee. There was a person who worked there and just started hiring me as a freelancer to do music for their videos. And then at one point I remember that my boss there, the person who I was working for to make music, said like, hey, I need you to do this thing and have it done by tomorrow. And I was like, oh, I can't do that because I have this SAT, like I have students this afternoon. And she was like, Jack, do you want to be a math teacher or do you want to be a musician? And I was like, oh, I want to be a musician.
Doing Google
That's what
corporate background music.
No, not doing Google corporate background music. But what's interesting about that, it was close enough to what I wanted to do that I was able to develop my skill sets in production and engineering and mixing and all the things that allowed me to write and record my own music that, made it sound better. And so I learned a lot doing those things that made it kind of work for me, as a musician. So I mean, she was right. I wanted to spend more time doing that stuff and less time teaching math. And that's when I kind of dropped that gig. And through all this, I was writing songs and making music and making albums and putting them out and starting to find my audience on YouTube. That's when I started uploading videos to YouTube.
What type of audience walked in the door first? Weirdos like
yeah. Well, for sure weirdos. It's like the people who were using YouTube like in 2007, so it was just after the Google acquisition and very, very early YouTube days. I had made an album that I was really proud of. And so I didn't start posting on YouTube to find an audience. I started posting on YouTube because I saw these people who were doing really well on YouTube. And so I started posting what I thought were advertisements on YouTube to try and send people to my MySpace page, because I had my album on MySpace.
Back in the day.
Yeah. Uploaded my album to MySpace. I wanted more folks to listen to that album. So I uploaded these videos to YouTube that were just short little snippets, like maybe a 2-minute snippet of me just messing around in my studio and putting a song together. I would do it start to finish in 48 hours. I'd make a little original song that I was hoping would attract people and get them to check out my fully produced album over there that I spent 6 months on, And what ended up happening was I would make these little, videos with music. And then I'd say, go check out my full album at myspace.com/JackConte. And nobody went to my MySpace page. Everybody started in the comments section of the YouTube videos. Everybody started saying hey, where can I get the audio file for this song? And I was like, no. That's not the song you want. The song you want is over here. That's the good stuff. And look, I did that for probably a year. And I finally realized nobody cares about this record. Everybody wants these quick little fun things that I'm making and putting on YouTube. And so I started releasing those as audio tracks using a link release system called eJunkie, which I cobbled together, a website for, and was able to kind of sell an MP3 for $1. And that's when I started actually making money from my original music.
And a lot of the story for a lot of people is I built this tool and it helped me. And then I went to, but you kept moving as a musician as well. And then working with your now wife.
Yes. So about a year later in 2008, Natalie and I formed Pomplamoose in the summer of 2008. And our first video was actually uploaded to my YouTube channel because we didn't have a band. We just did a collab together. We were thinking, let's have a Jack and Natalie song. And actually, when we first did it, we were thinking, I'll produce Natalie's song. But then by the time it came out, it was clearly a collaboration and clearly was the sum of two parts. And so we decided to call it something. And Natalie's friend had just gotten back from Europe and thought Pomplamoose was a hilarious word. So we bought pomplamoose.com and decided to call the band Pomplamoose. And that was it. Because it just sounds funny.
It just sounds funny.
Yeah, that's it.
So you guys continued on YouTube, continued to have iTunes downloads, continued to build your brand, continued to play with videos. And what tripped you over the wire, though I know it's been talked about a lot more in a lot of other places, to then say Patreon is the direction to go?
Okay. So that was now, the formation of Pomplamoose was 2008. Patreon didn't start until 2013. So there's a lot in that chunk there. But the long and short of it is, Pomplamoose ended up doing quite well and finding fit, and actually making quite a bit of money. I mean, we bought a house off of our MP3 sales and built a little recording studio, and that was in 2010. And then Natalie started to focus on her solo career. And so she signed a record deal with Warner and went off to tour the world. And she literally did a world tour for her solo record and her solo project. And during those 6 months, I was at home alone. And so I was getting really into electronic music at the time. and listening to I was just obsessed with semi-modular synthesis. And in particular, I felt like folks in the field of electronic dance music were designing synthesizers that were more complex and more beautiful than synthesizers I'd ever heard in my life. They were more dynamic, and this is during like the sort of talking bass era, which I think is still happening. But I was stunned by those sounds and how organic they were and how complex and just rich they were. And so I really wanted to learn how to make sound design like that. And so I spent 2 years from 2011 to 2013 going really deep on semi-modular synthesis and sound design. And that eventually became videos that were technological. So I built this one with a partner. I built this one solenoid hand. It was basically like linear actuators that would press a launch pad, which is a MIDI controller. And I almost did it as a joke because the linear actuators were controlled by MIDI. And so they were like, it was a MIDI controlled MIDI controller. And it was this weird loop thing. I thought it was going to be a joke. It actually was. It ended up doing quite well. It was a very cool thing to watch this robotic hand play a MIDI controller. And so that video started to take off. Natalie's out by herself alone. I'm getting really into electronic music. I've now got 4 songs that I'm really excited about. One of them I'm super excited about. I start to build a music video for this one song. And I just went really deep on this one video. I got lost in the rabbit hole. I think that maybe if there's like
recurring theme.
a lesson, recurring theme, it's just I'll rabbit hole on something and go really, really deep. So I went really deep on this video. I ended up working with one guy who built a 3D printed hexapod robot, second guy who built a animatronic head, both from scratch. I built a replica of Millennium Falcon cockpit behind me for this set. I spent 3 months. I drained my savings account. I built these rotating elevators. I framed a wall in my studio and built the Millennium Falcon against this wall. I mean, I looking back on it, it was crazy. Like I don't know what I was expecting to happen, but I went all out on this video. I filmed the whole process, ended up maxing out 2 credit cards. And coming out of this process, that's when I started thinking about the fact that I wasn't going to make money from all of this work, and that I was going to put out something on the web that was going to reach 1 million people, because that's what my videos were getting when I would upload them. It was like, okay, I'm going to put something out. I'm making a piece of art. My fans are going to go nuts about it. Like, I know they're going to go nuts because they're going to see me going crazy in my studio by myself. They're going to be rooting for me. They're going to know I put my whole soul into this video, and I'm going to get paid less than $200 for this video, and in ad revenue. And the kind of sinking, like the feeling was, it's hard to even describe. It was horror. It was disgust, not just for myself. It was disgust knowing that these are the systems that we humans as a species have designed and deployed globally as a mechanism for compensating creators for their output. And that was like horrific to me, that like knowing that there were so many people just like me giving their everything to their art and uploading it onto a website and having all of the value, the energy, the enthusiasm, the comments, the likes, the engagement, the passion, all of that energy was winding up in Google's market cap instead of in the pockets of the creators who brought the internet to life. And that was this kind of horrible realization that essentially led to me thinking there's got to be a better way here. There's got to be a system where creators are, the discrepancy between what a creator is worth and what a creator gets paid is closed. We have to close that gap. And I sat down one Sunday afternoon. I sketched out this idea on 14 sheets of printer paper. The idea was like, hey, when my fans get involved in something, they really value it. Like they really value it with their wallets. And it's different than when advertisers work with me. When advertisers work with me, they don't care about me. When an advertiser is involved, they don't care. They just care about eyeballs. But when my fans get involved, they will do anything. They're loyal. And
also,
so that was
but also
idea.
through YouTube and other platforms, it's also, there's a disconnect. So you can't even see them and they can't see you either. So this is really making that bridge, which also other people have stepped into that bridge since, but that bridge was one of the places to hook as well, right?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the strength of connection is really an important thing. And anything that you can do to strengthen that connection, to deepen that engagement, I think is really important for musicians. What makes that hard, this is a whole separate conversation, a separate problem, is some musicians actually actively fight that and don't want that, right? They just want their fans to love their work, not to love them as people. And yeah, again, that's a whole conversation there. But
it's really a fourth wall question, right? That I want to be behind a screen, or I want to be actually in direct connection. And it's an interesting question of this time, because now so many people, this is their platform, that they're in a direct to fan live stream experience, which I'm kind of cutting ahead to, but we'll loop backwards. But
sure.
Luckily so many different platforms have been in place, including Patreon, to make that direct connect. So when things have gotten scrambled, there's another way to make that connection.
Exactly. Yeah. And that was the thinking. It was when there's a direct relationship between the fan and the creator, between the creator and the fan, it ends up working out for the fans better. It ends up working out for the creators better.
So you took those 14 sheets of printer paper and went back to Stanford land, or went back to Stanford Connections, right? When you tapped with Sam on the shoulder and said, "This is what I want to do."
Yep. I called up Sam, and he was actually, at the time, he was launching a different website.
I know you're busy doing something else, but I would like to play with you.
That was exactly what it was. And he was like, okay, well, I'm busy launching this thing. He was like, why don't we meet next week after my launch? And I said, great. And so the following week, we met at a little coffee shop in San Francisco. And I pitched him this idea. I showed him the drawings, showed him the whole thing. And he exploded. I mean, he got it like that. He got it. He was following a bunch of creators online and loved creators and would, listen to them on Spotify and would follow them on YouTube. And so he got it instantly. And he actually started building it that night, is when he started coding it. And we exchanged some emails, and that was the beginning of Patreon.
So innovating in music tends to not be a smooth journey. What were the biggest unanticipated hiccups in your Patreon launch?
Yeah, I think innovating in anything isn't a smooth journey. I think I heard somebody say recently that like innovation is like the opposite of efficiency. It was something like that, which resonated so hard with me, because innovation is messy. When you're like building something new, it's mostly failure, which I know is almost trite to say, and there's the whole fail fast thing in Silicon Valley and blah blah blah, but like it's trite because it is at its in deeply it is true. And like it's mostly things not working, ideas not connecting, trying something that just is off and then ditching it, and the pain of having to ditch something that so it's mostly that. And some of those missteps, I mean, I'll give you a bunch. Once we kind of had wireframes, we had a list of 40 creators that I thought would be awesome on Patreon. And I was really excited to have them, use Patreon. And we contacted all of them, and all of them said no. All of a sudden, all of them said, no, thank you, but that's not for me. I wouldn't want that. And that was like, I was kind of disappointed. I was also, I remember talking to some other people who would they said they would try to help get some creators to be excited about it too. And they didn't have luck either. But we kind of decided to go for it anyway, because I had confidence that if I went up and did this, my fans would support me. And I just knew it would work. And like, even if it just worked for me, like I was cool with that. I just wanted to not get paid $200 a month. I wanted to get paid what I was worth. And so I knew it would work for me, even if other creators didn't want to do it. So we did it anyway. That's one thing, is like literally pitching this idea to 40 people who said no. Another, just messy thing is the last 34 hours before launching Patreon, literally before going live with the website. The website was live, but obviously no one knew about it or was going to it, but we posted the website, we made it live. And then what caused that first wave of traffic to patreon.com was I uploaded the music video, this robot music video that I'd spent 3 months making. And at the end of that music video, I put a little vlog where I said, hey, everybody, go check out this new website that I'm making with my buddy called Patreon. And let's see if this works. I think it could help a lot of creative people. Let's, come on this journey with me. And that last 34 hours before uploading the video, was a total scramble. I think I'm just not a very good project manager or whatever it is, but I was up for 34 straight hours. I'd been up since 6 a.m. the day before. I think I made like 4 different videos. Like I made my Patreon video. I finished the robot music video. I made the main Patreon video for what Patreon is, which my wife ended up helping me make at the last minute because I was totally maxed out. Plus I had to finish my record because my record was coming out the same day. All of this was kind of cobbled up together on one big launch. And it was just insane. So, there's that was pretty wild. And then of course, as soon as we launched, all my fans just, rushed to Patreon to support me. And because they saw this music video and it totally blew their minds and they wanted to help, and so they did. And it's a classic story. It crashed the servers. Sam had to spin up a new box because it was just a huge spike in traffic and more than we anticipated. I mean, all the kind of classic things that you hear when you kind of just really rage into product market fit, And so that was a wild moment as well, and very, very messy. Like, we were not strategic about it at all. When we launched Patreon, Sam launched Patreon without having built payments.
Oh,
so we launched on May 7th. Yeah,
that's a kind of a big hole.
We launched on May 7th. He hadn't written the logic for payments yet, so he had 23 days to write the logic for payments before we processed cards on the 1st of the next month. So there's just so many little things like that. Like it was wild.
So how different is Patreon now?
I mean, it's night and day, right? It's funny because to me, it feels like a huge company, like I remember the days where Patreon was me and Sam and, Tyler was our first employee. And so me, Sam, and Tyler for a couple months, just like working out of our kitchens and meeting up in, San Francisco every once in a while at a coffee shop. And so to have like 200 teammates and global offices and, systems and processes and managers and, HR protocol, like it feels enormous to me. It feels like just like a huge company. And then, of course, we bring in operators, who have been at 1,000-person companies and 5,000-person companies, and they can't believe how much we haven't figured out yet, right? They're like, oh my gosh, how come you haven't done this yet? And what about this? And what about this HR system? Why isn't any of this in place yet? And, from my perspective, we're just building something from scratch. We're flying by the seat of our pants here. So yeah, I'm not sure if I answered your question.
No, definitely. Because I was then going to bridge to and then you had to send them all home to work from home after having built this custom built creation, almost like you've got your video with the Millennium Falcon, all custom built. Now this custom built company, and now you're having to not pivot, but pivot to still make all this available while all of your customers were going through massive life changes. How did that happen? How did that work?
Yeah, that was just, again, another messy, hard moment where like we were watching what was happening around us. And, one by one, more and more companies started to send employees home. And I think Patreon, we weren't like the first company to do it. I think Twitter was the first company to do it. But we were in that first wave, within that first week of companies that's just basically said, okay, everybody, if you want to work from home, you do not have to come into the office. And then a little while later, we basically shut the office and we said, okay, you can't come into the office. And then we had to figure out how to work together as a remote team. And yeah, that was just more learning and figuring things out. And I think we've stayed very productive. The company is executing very well, and we hit all our goals over the last couple months, and that's been amazing to see the team rally and step up and have the grit and the tenacity to get through something like this. It's not easy on people. There's a lot of, it's really tough. A lot of folks at Patreon, like who are parents, are having to figure out having kids at home and being on Zoom with kids in the background, and school's closed, and so now their kids are home with them, and that's incredibly difficult. And not everybody has a great internet connection. So there's just been honestly, a lot of the little logistics have been difficult, but again, the team's really rallied, and I'm really proud of the folks at Patreon. I think they've done an amazing job coping and figuring out how to make it work given these new circumstances.
And we're talking now in June. I know in March of 2020, you guys in your blog talked about the actual uplift in people who were both coming to the platform for the first time and fans coming to support the creators. Has that continued to lift since March, or any other kind of ahas or new findings from that?
Yes. I mean, yes, it has. It's been the fastest moment of growth for Patreon in our history as a company. And I think it's basically because, a few things have happened. Honestly, if the framework that you use for examining the situation is the lines of revenue in a creative business, right? What are the lines of revenue in a creative business? There's like merchandise, there's ad revenue, there's live and touring. Those are some of the main lines. And then there's licensing and royalties and some other things. But even with just those, with just that handful, live, forget it. Like Live Nation canceled all touring. AEG canceled all global touring. So, there are musicians that were looking forward to hundreds of thousands of dollars of touring revenue over the course of a year, evaporated, in 2 weeks, gone, no more touring income. Okay, now they have to figure out what are they going to do about that, and what are the alternatives. But you can go revenue line by revenue line. Okay, what about ad revenue? Well, we entered a global recession because of COVID, and so companies slashed their sales and marketing budgets, which means they were flooding the market with fewer advertisements, which means the CPMs for creators took a haircut, which is how much someone will pay for 1,000 impressions. Because companies just weren't advertising as much, that metric took a hit. And so creators were seeing, I saw one database that showed creators were taking a hit anywhere from 20 to 30% in terms of ad revenue. And so now they need to look for alternatives. And then you can go revenue line by revenue line. Okay, what about events? What about merchandise? What about merchandise sold from live events? Same thing, like all gone. So like every line of business for creators, has disappeared except for subscription revenue from fans, which has not only remained stable, it's actually gone through quite a bump, an uptick, because I think a lot of people right now are trying to figure out, what can I do to help? And like supporting a creator is a really easy way to help, to do something today that is helpful and makes sense. And so a lot of patrons just literally upped their pledge to creators. And a lot of creators went to their patrons and said, hey, everybody, I can't tour. I can't sell merchandise at conventions. I can't do my live events. My ad revenue has gone down and I need you to step up. And fans did. So yeah, Patreon has seen not only just a ton of creators start to launch on the platform because their revenue lines have disappeared, but we've also seen fans really step up to the challenge to make sure that creators can maintain their businesses through such a tough economic period.
And new lines of revenue with live streams, or, in many ways, there were folks who were staying there ready for live streams for a long time and were kind of ready and waiting. And other people who were saying, what's this live stream thing? And then can I do a VIP end of that? Or can I have a custom live stream? And so you guys were in a good position to be a foothold there as well.
Yes. It's one of those things, everybody talks about COVID and this pandemic accelerating certain behaviors. And I think one of them has been just the adoption of, remote technology and digital platforms. And as the kind of primary tool for connection in a time when we're really disconnected. And so the platforms that are offering connection, are seeing this huge boost. And one of those ways to do that is live streaming. And I think particularly for musicians, the idea of playing a show, but doing it for your fans over a live stream is obvious, right? It's so obvious. It's just something that people haven't spent the time to figure out. But when you're sitting at home now and you can't go on tour and you can't play shows and your ad revenue's gone down, you got to figure that out too. So we've seen folks adopt like new platforms and, jump to Stage It and a lot of pre-existing sites. But then there's also been people who have been leveraging live streaming as a way of getting new patrons. So they'll do a live stream, and then on the live stream, they'll say, hey, if you want more of these, or if you want to support me in general, go to my Patreon and become a patron, and you'll get extra live streams, and you'll get, extra, newsletter once a month, and you'll get some behind the scenes videos and things like that. And that's been fantastic to see. There's one creator I'm quite good friends with, and he was telling me his touring globally got canceled, and his only revenue at this point was Patreon. And he started doing live streams and sending people to his Patreon page, and his subscription revenue doubled like over the course of a couple weeks, just because he started doing live streams and sending people to his Patreon page.
And then there's the question of how this continues further on, right? So that we're going to be having this weird hybrid time. We don't know. People listening to this in the future probably going, but we knew that it was going to take a year for things. So everyone's kind of in this era of both uncertainty, but now having a direct connection with their fans. How do you see Patreon being able to change and be supportive of what this transition will be?
Broadly speaking, I think, again, this goes back to our first conversation around the creator as a small business, which is essentially what creators and musicians are. They're their own small businesses, except no one's building for them, and the infrastructure and tooling for their businesses doesn't exist yet. And they're their own CEO, and they have to do everything themselves. But it really is a small business. They need everything else a small business needs, including revenue diversification. And I think a lot of creators are learning that firsthand, just like businesses learned it, right? Where they have all their eggs in one revenue line, and then something macroeconomic happens that disturbs that revenue line. And if they had all their eggs in that one basket, it can be big trouble for them. And so whether or not creators, like, I've talked to thousands and thousands of creators at this point. Not everyone has the kind of business vocabulary. A lot of them do. A lot of them are entrepreneurs and think like entrepreneurs, but a lot of them don't. But they still deeply understand the concept of diversification and revenue diversification. Even if they don't know that vocabulary, they understand the importance of it, and they're starting to do that with their businesses, right? So they have some ad revenue, they do some live streams, they do some virtual goods and tipping on live streams, they do super chats, they have a Patreon, they get some Spotify income, they go on tour. Now they have 10 or 15 different revenue lines, which is awesome for creators because it means they're building more robust businesses that are less susceptible to massive fluctuations because of some world event that's completely outside of their control. So the way Patreon can play a part in that is, building this amazing line of subscription revenue for creators so that they can, be diversified and so that they can have a healthy business, even if something happens outside of their control.
As a creator yourself, what's your wish list for what the next year or two looks like? Because you're largely not touring. You're largely now generating 100 releases a year. What is that?
Yeah.
So are you now, and we started talking about the machine, are you now a machine that just continues forward and connects with your fans virtually? Or are there new businesses that you wish existed?
Yeah, so there are always new things that I wish existed. We've cut out all touring. Obviously we're not doing any touring. We're not doing any live. We're not planning for any touring. We're not planning for any live. And so, we've had to adjust our creative process one more time because for a couple of months it was shelter in place. And so we weren't even allowed to make those trips down to Los Angeles to record in a studio with other people. So we had to transition to completely remote production, which we did. And we came out with a bunch of videos that were just, people shooting in their bedrooms on their iPhones. And then we cobbled it all together and mixed it. And, it was a thing. Things that I'm looking forward to over the next couple of years as a creator myself. Maybe a few things. One, I think as powerful as creators are now, and they're quite powerful, right? Like advertisers call creators influencers. Like that's how powerful they are. As powerful as they are now, I think creators are going to be even more powerful in the future because people are starting to realize that fans go where creators go. And you can see it in what's happening. Creators have so much leverage. Creators are getting huge deals to be exclusive on a platform now, like Joe Rogan on Spotify or, whatever it is.
Or Ninja, who's flipped back. Ninja. After being pulled away to Mixer and now is flipping. Yeah.
Exactly. That leverage is people are starting to get it. And that's going to just exponentially increase over the next few years. And I'm looking forward to that for creators. I'm looking forward to a world where creators are increasingly powerful and finally have voices that are heard and have a say in the ecosystems in which they participate. I think that's going to be a beautiful, wonderful world for creators where they have leverage for the first time in literally like thousands of years. It's so exciting. I think it's such an exciting time to be a creative person and to be alive right now. So I'm really looking forward to that. And then from a personal standpoint for Pamplemousse and Scary Pockets, I think I'm looking forward to, I think I'm looking forward to, 2 years ago, if you were to show us a picture of where we are now, I wouldn't have believed it. I wouldn't have believed it. Like the progress that we've made and how we've grown as artists and how we've leveled up our music and how we've leveled up our systems. And it's just really fulfilling and exciting. And I have no idea what that's going to look like 2 years from now. I'm looking forward to whatever that feels like and whatever that looks like, growing the music, growing the video, making it more interesting, more engaging. Pamplemousse is starting to experiment with directors and having narrative style music videos instead of just performance music videos. And we're hiring animators now. And we're really like making things that are getting better and better and different than we imagined 6 months ago. And it's just cool to see it kind of blooming and unfolding. So, it's kind of a wonderful surprise. So I think that's probably the thing I'm most looking forward to, is just continuing to be surprised and excited about how it changes.
Well, we're at the end of our conversation, Jack. This has been really charming to speak with you on this. Anything else you'd want to mention before we wrap up? And if someone's going to get a hold of you, what do you need? What do you need people to reach out with?
Yeah, maybe the only other thing I'd say just to wrap up, I kind of just said it, but maybe a slightly different way is, for the first time in history, creators have the ability to say something and be heard by lots and lots of people. I think it's easy to get used to that and to not be enthusiastic about that anymore, or to not just let that blow our minds. But it blows my mind every day. Like I think it's so important to continuously realize how special that is and how wonderful it is that creative people can reach anybody now. And you don't need somebody in a suit to think you're cool enough to get onto BBC One or BBC Two or BBC Three. You don't need that anymore. You can build your own business. You can make more than a living. You can build a profitable business, and you can hire employees. You can build your dream. Like, these are things that, like, you could not build a small business media company 15 years ago, 10 years ago even. And the fact that like creators have access to not only the distribution tools, but the financial tools now, the creation tools. Like, we all have 4K cinema cameras in our pockets. Yeah. It's unbelievable. And it's like all the pieces have come into place for creators. It's such an exciting time to be a creative person. I think it's really important to just remember that and to not get too used to the baseline. Humans kind of grow accustomed to whatever environment they're in. I don't want to get used to that because it's just so special and it's such a wonderful time. So that's that. And then I guess how to reach me? Well, you can follow Pamplemousse on YouTube, Scary Pockets on YouTube. You can listen to us on Spotify. We're everywhere that you would listen to music. But yeah, that's my presence. And then of course, Patreon. You can come on to Patreon, become a creator or a patron of your favorite creators.
Excellent. Jack, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So that's the episode. Thanks for joining us at Creative Innovators with Gigi Johnson. We welcome you to subscribe on all your favorite podcasting services and come nominate people to be on the podcast. Come to your favorite social media where you can find us as well, or come find us at creativeinnovatorspodcast.com and nominate people that you may not even know that you'd like to see on the show. Thanks again, and we'll talk to you next time with Creative Innovators with Gigi Johnson.